Today I'm scientifically questioning regression to cause, used by so many hypnotherapists out there. Recently on a Facebook discussion forum, in response to someone else's comments, I wrote this, which I'm reading up on the back of our wall. Many are outspoken authors against the use of regression due to the very damning scientific evidence about the dangers of regression, in particular the dangers of using regression in conjunction with hypnosis. Those of you with expertise in regression are surely aware of topics such as the reconstructive nature of memory, retraumatization, hypnosis not guaranteeing veracity of memory, hypnosis making false memories more believable, and numerous other issues that mean real quality evidence to support regression to cause is incredibly sparse. Now, within an hour of me writing that, I received an email from someone who teaches regression to cause and for whom it is the backbone of their training school's ethos. Among other things, that person wrote to me and said, "Your last post is just outrageous and proves to me that you have absolutely no clue about regression to cause hypnotherapy. I truly suggest you get properly trained before making such claims," and went on to ask me, "Please provide such scientific proof." So I did. I did just that, and when asked for scientific proof for the statements that I make, I refer people to the articles that I've written in the past decade on this subject. And these are not my own personal studies, they're not my own personal opinion, they're not my own personal beliefs, they are scientific studies that have informed my professional position. Since days of Freudian and psychodynamic therapy, many subsequent schools of therapy have believed it is useful, even cathartic, to use hypnosis to purposely induce an abreaction and regress to previous traumatic memories to relive them, and once they are no longer repressed, they let go and have therapeutic benefit. Some would say that there's no evidence whatsoever to support the usefulness of this notion. I realise that's probably getting lots of people's backs up right now. But mainstream psychological research on memory clearly demonstrates the reconstructive nature of this sort of memory, and clinicians are well aware of the issues surrounding the false memory syndrome controversies of the 1990s. A recent review of the clinical and research literature in this area by 5 leading authorities on the subject concluded by recommending that the American Psychological Association should actually change its codes to make it mandatory for psychologists to have clients sign an informed consent agreement before undertaking regression of any kind, and have it explained in writing that research provides overwhelming evidence that these memories are reconstructed rather than recovered. It really does matter whether recovered memories are real or not, which becomes very apparent when you look at the literature on victims of false memory syndrome. False memory syndrome has been the basis for the most expensive multi-million-dollar civil litigation cases in the history of the American psychiatric profession. It's unquestionably a massive legal and moral issue with extremely serious implications for the entire field of psychotherapy and hypnotherapy. The entire debate exploded in the 1990s, and so it should be thoroughly common knowledge by now that there's cause for concern. Most professional bodies were forced to issue policy statements on the risks attached to false memory syndrome. In responses to these controversies surrounding recovered memory and reports of abuse, in 1995, the APA, the American Psychological Association, they recommended that those seeking psychotherapy be cautious of therapists who instantly accept or dismiss explanations of childhood abuse. The organization further stated that childhood abuse is not correlated with any specific set of symptoms in adulthood. False memory syndrome, it's a term coined in the early 1990s by the False Memory Syndrome Foundation to describe a theory that some adults who belatedly remember instances of sexual abuse from their childhood may be mistaken about the accuracy of their memory, and that the so-called false memories may have been the result of recovered memory therapy, another term also coined by the foundation in the early 90s. False memory syndrome proponents argue that self-help books such as The Courage to Heal and recovered memory therapists are likely to influence adults to develop false memories. According to this theory, psychologists and psychiatrists may accidentally implant false memories. The Ontario consultants on religious tolerance had speculated during the 80s and 90s that thousands or tens of thousands of therapists attempted to recover memories of early childhood abuse from their clients. And research has shown that traumatized individuals respond by using a variety of psychological mechanisms. One of the most common means of dealing with the pain is to try and push it out of awareness. And some label that phenomenon where the mind avoids this acknowledgement of traumatic experiences as dissociative amnesia. Others use terms such as repression, dissociation, traumatic amnesia, psychogenic shock, motivated forgetting. Semantics aside, there's near universal acceptance of the fact that the mind is capable of avoiding conscious recall of traumatic experiences. What's also been proven is that when we recall any memory, so-called recall, however deeply repressed, we're actually reconstructing it. We create the memory according to the person that we are today. It's not necessarily truly accurate. It's reconstructed. In 2003, Stephen Lin and his colleagues conducted a systematic review of the research on recovered memory. And they stated that if therapists decide to use memory recovery techniques, then they should provide their clients with a written, informed consent document that apprises them of accurate, scientifically grounded information about the reconstructive nature of memory, the fact that recovered memories must be corroborated before they can be given any special credence, and thirdly, the information regarding studies, laboratory studies of memory pertinent to the technique employed. And that was Stephen Lin and his colleagues in 2003, big meta-analysis. And therefore, advising a hypnotherapy client that research on recovered or false memories is relevant and it's ethical and it meets your legal duty of care with regard to regression in hypnotherapy. The contention of the research team quoted was that therapists have a legal and an ethical obligation to explain current evidence regarding the reconstructive nature of memory. And this debate offers up, an interesting dilemma in our professional ethics. In respect of understanding these issues further, I myself looked in depth at the website of the British False Memory Society in particular, a group that was set up to protect victims of false memory syndrome. And there are accounts there of many people over the years who've been left disturbed by false memories installed during regression or repressed memory therapies. Additionally, when people are revisiting previous traumatic experiences inside their mind through the medium of hypnosis in particular, which is known to amplify and exaggerate thought processes and emotions, we run the risk of retraumatization. This is now exposing them to all the emotion, the raw sensation of the original experience, and potentially enhancing the issue. When we have a duty of care and a legal duty at that, we should avoid using regression in hypnotherapy, according to some people. Historically, a popular misconception about hypnosis is that we use hypnosis to regress as a matter of course. Hilgard in the 1980s demonstrated that people who are suggestible can regress just as easily without any hypnotic induction. Of course, in hypnotherapy, we're not capable of actually going back in time. We might perceive that we're in a previous experience, but the individual's not actually there. So to suggest that changes can be made to the original event by re-experiencing it, as many psychodynamic hypnotherapists do, is somewhat of a fallacy. In fact, a study by Lawrence and Perry in the 80s suggested that it's actual role play rather than being regressed. And role play is an effective means of creating behavior. And if a client is role playing an unwanted memory, this could mean that they're just reinforcing the unwanted memory and further embedding the unwanted response to it. I think you reduce these risks in therapy by looking at alternatives to regression in hypnotherapy wherever possible. I teach regression and was actually taught it myself by two of the most famous regression proponents in modern hypnotherapy history. When I teach it, I teach the critique too. I think hypnotherapists need to be capable of knowing both sides of any argument, intervention, debate, philosophy, and not just regurgitate what they've been taught, then dig their heels in and believe in that dogma for the remainder of their professional lives. Many members of the public just assume that hypnotherapy is all about regressive types of intervention. And I'm keen for that same public to know that in fact, regression is viewed by many as flawed, by some as dangerous, and that there are many other ways to make effective change using hypnotherapy than scratching around inside old memories. There are many schools and even associations that offer little more than regression therapy and psychodynamic approaches to hypnotherapy. Naturally, they have a vested interest in not necessarily demonstrating certain things to their students and advocates. I doubt an institute that only teaches regression or hypnoanalysis, for example, is going to teach their students about the fundamental flaws that most academics have cited about their approach and techniques. When it comes to regression, let me state a couple of things here. There is empirical evidence. Lynn, Locke, Myers and Payne in the 1990s is just one example of many pieces of research suggesting this and supporting this. Hypnosis does not increase the reliability of memory. It doesn't guarantee veracity. This is one of the reasons that hypnosis is no longer admissible in a court of law in any Western country, and there are even many cases being reviewed in the world where hypnosis was used in testimony. Plain and simple, it's proven that hypnosis does not enhance the ability to reliably recall memories. And this is contrary to many media representations, film clips, and general myths about hypnosis. Secondly, then, there's further evidence, if you look at Nash in the 1980s and several others, to prove that hypnosis does not foster a literal re-experiencing of childhood events. There's much more evidence that can be looked at, but research upon research indicates very clearly the reconstructive nature of memory I've mentioned already. And that is, we reconstruct memories. Whether in hypnosis or not, we reconstruct them. During the course of our lives, our memories change. Our perceptions, our values, our beliefs, rationalizations, ideas, our life experiences all alter the perception we have of that memory. We do not re-experience them with absolute accuracy. And in fact, we distort them. I've discussed the dangers of that already, I think. A close friend of mine had an operation last year and was told that there was a 0.5% chance of damage by cutting to one of her organs with the surgical procedure. And it's not what you want to hear. Despite this, it's diligent medical ethical practice to do so. It is informed consent. With regression, there's a risk of what we refer to as retraumatization, as I've mentioned, and that is by again exposing the client to the event, they could effectively experience the trauma of such an experience. There are websites, resources, pieces of research that give masses more detail you can Google. About the phenomena of re-traumatization. But for example, when people are experiencing incredibly vivid dreams, they've been affected by them. People who've seen certain things on television have known to adopt unwanted reactions, fears, and anxiety disorders, as well as maladaptive behaviors. In hypnosis, experience can be amplified and magnified. Visiting someone's own representation of a traumatic event, whether it's reconstructed or not, can be creating a problem. We do not consider that perhaps we have a duty to advise the client that could happen. This, of course, creates a paradox for hypnotherapists. If you suggest that such a thing may happen, you increase the chances of it actually happening. We're in the field of suggestion after all, and making such a suggestion is very likely going to increase the chances of that unpleasant traumatic effect occurring. In hypnotherapy, we refer to clients as having an abreaction, a very negative emotional release of some kind. And these are believed by many to happen spontaneously, but can be avoided if directed and educated properly. Yet many schools I've encountered seem to think that abreaction is what they want to happen in therapy. It seems to me that regression with hypnosis is increasingly becoming an outmoded train of thought, an outmoded modality of therapy. And there are many ways to deal with the experience one has today, rather than insist on spending hours wading in previous upset. By all means, I'm not suggesting that we just ignore the past. Of course not. We treat it with the utmost respect. But insisting that the best way to get therapeutic results is to use regression is limited at best. Train in better, more efficacious methods of hypnotherapy intervention. Those where people learn to be happy and look forward to the therapeutic experience, for example. Now, this is a hearty debate, mainly because it's one of the most researched and most popular techniques used for recovering memories. Back in the 1990s, Poole, Lindsay, Memon and Bull conducted a survey that demonstrated roughly a third of all psychologists in the US at the time used hypnosis to help their patients recall memories. And I've mentioned what happened back in the 90s. Hypnotherapists need to know that using hypnosis to recover memories can actually lead to the patient, the client, creating new material and adding it to the existing memories they have. There's a huge body of scientific and medical information available that shows the very nature of memory being so malleable means that hypnosis usage could result in the creation and implanting of false memories. And I've already mentioned the reconstructive nature of memory, but do refer to the Lin and the McConkie study of 1998 in particular for more information on this. It's very much the consensus among cognitive scientists that this is the case. You see, not only is memory unreliable, but people have such belief in the reliability of their memories to such an extent that we're capable of creating false memories, even if a therapist is greatly skilled at not leading the patient in any way, shape, or form. Further studies that confirm this have been conducted by Lawrence and Perry that I mentioned, Barnier and Sheehan. And false memories can easily be created without hypnosis. Of course they can. Yet many therapists continue to believe that hypnosis somehow brandishes the absolute truth when it comes to memory recall. And the truth is actually a tad more sinister. In 1994, Eridier reviewed 34 studies, and another review by Steble and Bothwell reviewed 24 studies, and throughout they showed that hypnosis does not increase the actual truth. What it does is it increases the volume of recall, and with that volume comes more incorrect as well as correct information. The studies revealed that hypnosis recall is no more accurate than non-hypnotic recall, but when recalled hypnotically, people were more confident in the reliability of the memory. That's a problem. The Steble and Bothwell study showed that hypnosis produces a lot more errors in memory recall and more volume of memories that had false information, but they believed in them more. Even researchers and individuals that openly state hypnosis is good for aiding recall have been unable to prove it. Some proponents have suggested that emotional arousal is required, yet a 90s study by Lin showed that hypnosis does not improve recall of emotionally arousing events. And highly emotional states do not affect hypnotic recall either. Now, out of everything that I've read and examined, probably the most damning evidence for using hypnosis to recall memories comes from the research conducted by Nash, Drake, Wiley, and colleagues in the 80s. And in this study, they attempted to match up memories of participants who'd been age regressed using hypnosis. The participants were regressed using hypnosis, and there was a control group, and taken back to the age of 3 to a scene where they were with their mothers. The participants described items and objects that were present, and the actual mothers were then asked to verify what was in the scene. And the hypnotized participants in the study were less able than those in the control group, the non-hypnotized people doing the same thing, to accurately match the reports of their parents. In fact, the control group were more accurate. A similar study conducted in the late 90s by Sivek, Lin and Malinovsky regressed the participants to 5 years old with the exact same results. And this is why the vast majority of countries today, as I said earlier, no longer allow hypnosis to be used in testimony in the court of law. In fact, in some states in the US, if you've used hypnosis to retrieve a memory, because of the evidence I've mentioned, the use of hypnosis makes the testimony null and void. Evidence suggests that when the hypnotherapist believes strongly in the efficacy of hypnosis for memory recall, then the patient has much more confidence in the reliability of the memory, and that is a problem. It's a hot topic, okay, because so many hypnotherapy training schools still teach regression without teaching any critique of it whatsoever, and they defend it to the hilt, and they get offended when someone such as myself questions what they know and they feel invested in. I've many professional colleagues who I respect and who use regression still today, and I give every opportunity for people to convince me of the reasons to use regression. For example, I've had major regression proponents and authors on my podcast, whereby I've given them a voice and I've discussed the topic in depth with them. However, the issue comes when those who pose as teachers and educators in this field, who only teach a single slanted position in support of their own stance. If you're going to teach regression to cause, and if you're going to teach and potentially wrongly assume that many therapeutic issues have one single initial sensitizing event, then you also need to teach the critique of that. You need to teach and educate students about what the research says and what academics and scientists say, and give a rounded perspective, a full picture, not just give your own singular perspective. Now, isn't that at the heart of good quality education? So let me ask you a question, are you intelligent enough to see both sides of a theory, an argument, a stance, or a subject? Whether you agree with either side or neither side, are you intelligent enough just to see both sides? So if the answer that most people give is yes, why do you not get treated as such? Why do hypnotherapy schools not treat you with that? Why is it that so many teaching establishments in the hypnotherapy world are so flipping dogmatic about what they teach? Psychoanalytic schools of hypnotherapy very rarely teach their students these issues surrounding duty of care, informed consent, the reconstructive nature of memory, the risks of retraumatization when they're teaching regression therapy. I regularly meet hypnotherapists trained by regression-dominated organizations that haven't got a clue what retraumatization is, or that the memory reconstructs the past, often in a far different way than the initial experience. They do not know the science. They were not taught the opposing perspective. It's not just in the field of regression though. NLP training schools rarely point out the scientifically proven flaws in eye accessing cues or the validity of representational systems. I've met people, I've seen YouTube videos claiming that the cues are set in stone for everyone, whereas research tends to show that they don't. For them to be useful, you probably need to calibrate each individual uniquely. And why do those schools that teach hypnosis as being some kind of an altered state rarely ever illustrate the non-state viewpoint of hypnosis? I meet several people from Ericksonian hypnotherapy training courses, for example, who'd never even heard of any such debate as the state versus non-state that's central to the field of hypnosis. Conversational, indirect hypnosis trainings often state that what they do is better than direct or authoritative styled hypnosis, yet they offer no evidence to show us how or why, because there is virtually no evidence to suggest that. It may be a lovely, subtle, elegant way to communicate, but the efficacy as far as therapeutic gain is concerned is no higher than those using more direct, plain-speaking methods. You can go read the meta-analysis by Lynn, Neufeld and Mayer on that very subject. When teaching these subjects, then, why not highlight the limitations of that which you teach too? Isn't that progress? Isn't that how we develop and enhance this field? To build upon what we know, to challenge and improve what we do, to have a rounded, fully open-minded understanding of the entire subject, and not just feel the need to dig our heels in to one small aspect and defend it by suggesting it's better than everything else, regardless of any evidence to the contrary. Is it because those who teach this stuff just don't know the other side? Is it because they're scared of being challenged and being seen to be left wanting? Do they just know no better? Were taught that way and therefore espouse the way that they were taught as the right option, like it's the law? I mean, what if you trained 10, 15 years ago and have not kept abreast of developments and not done any relevant CPD, continued professional development? Worse still, what if your CPD is being conducted by people who know no better, who offer up one dogmatic approach also? I think it's important, especially for hypnotherapists, to be able to see, and at least see, and ideally fully understand both sides to a philosophy, debate, theory, and so on. It shows intelligence. It shows you know your subject and your field. The field of hypnotherapy, as with many other fields, has a proliferation of this kind of phenomena, whereby people teach something that they insist is the best and only way to go, blissfully unaware that there could potentially be more to understand and benefit from. If nothing else, we owe that to our clients who are investing money in our services to be offered the most effective solutions to enhance their well-being. No? You see, here's the thing. When I sent on these studies to the previously mentioned individual, the person I spoke about at the very beginning of this video, who demanded I sent on the scientific studies to support my Facebook forum statement, not only was I very surprised that this person knew nothing about any of these studies or anything about these arguments, but the reply I got stated that the experimenters and researchers I was citing simply did not know how to do regression properly. It begged belief, really. Asking me for the evidence, then when presented with the evidence, simply finding some other random reason to refute it. Major confirmation bias. Why not work with the studies and let it inform and update what you do and how you do it, instead of just digging your heels in and becoming entrenched in the dogma I keep referring to? The individual suggested that I was wrong. I knew no better. I needed proper training, regardless of what any of the studies suggested. He used a lot of personal anecdote to support his own stance. And, I don't want to rubbish anyone's professional experience. It just felt like this person only wanted to see studies if they supported that stance. We was not interested in any studies that questioned that stance. And that's the point of studies. As part of my own ongoing research, I submit papers to peer-reviewed journals. A recent paper of mine is going to be one of the first of its kind. And it's a fairly prestigious journal with a quality peer review board that have differing theoretical stances than those presented in my paper. And that's the point of peer review. You get scrutinized and robustly critiqued, and it may not always feel nice, but you accept it, you use it, you develop your work as a result. I put hours and hours of my time and effort into my research. I've worked incredibly hard. I've invested myself heavily, and naturally I feel protective over it. And I could get defensive about the critique. Yet I think it is wonderful to receive that feedback from fellow researchers, academics and authors that I've long looked up to. It's true. I think it's exhilarating to have a robust critique of my work and to have it scrutinized. My work gets better as a result. I get better as a result. Regularly, I'll go and look at the reviews my books, my audio programs have received. It's not without a slight sense of trepidation, but when it is properly qualified and constructive, I take it on board. I do all I can to respond to it. The toughest criticism we receive is often the place where we grow, where we develop, we learn most. And I typically look at it as a way to get better. At the end of courses, seminars, training events, lectures, we hand out feedback forms so we can get anonymous, structured feedback and can refine, develop, make our educational offerings better. Every top quality training that I've ever been on did this, in line with top quality educational standards and methods. All the poor quality trainings that I've attended did nothing of the sort. When working with individual clients for hypnotherapy, I want to get honest feedback about how they're getting on and how things can be done better. And this is going to help them more. We'll get better results and I'll become more effective. Using feedback forms, measuring scales, engaging in reflective practice, having regular supervision. These are all ways of ensuring that we're looking to grow, develop and improve as hypnotherapists. It's a central part of how we should be working, surely. Yet I encounter a trend, this proliferation of classic head in the sand attitudes among hypnotherapists who fear asking for solid feedback, who take it personally instead of seeing it as an opportunity to grow, and who just want to crack on regardless, insisting that they know best. And there are many contributing reasons for this, but one big contributing factor is the very culture of hypnotherapy training and CPD training courses offered. Because they themselves do not offer or create a culture of wanting to grow and develop, and instead offer up a singular, impervious to critique type of attitude that does no one any good in the long run. Many hypnotherapy training courses offered to the public these days are a singular model, devised by the school founder or the lead trainer. Some are excellent, I'm sure, yet there's no critique offered of what they do. They virtually sell this singular model and extol all the reasons that it is so good, but do not offer up the other side of the debate or offer up potential criticisms of their model or favoured approach. However good a training is, the depth of education is always going to be lacking if there is not a transparent approach to what is being taught. Schools, colleges, universities will always will do their best to offer up the stance of fierce critics as well as those supporting a particular viewpoint. Even if the teacher sympathizes with a particular side, the critique of that side is taught and explored. And this is quality education. This is how a student learns, how a field of study grows. When hypnotherapy trainings simply say, this is the way it is, and do not allow for any critique, it halts potential for growth and development. And currently the field of hypnotherapy is held back by so many people doing just that. We need to be comfortable asking questions of our hypnotherapy training, not hiding in fear in case the trainer gets defensive, or, as was the case with me, someone trying to bully me with an immovable stance filled with logical fallacies. Likewise, we need to get better at thinking for ourselves because so many hypnotherapists seem to want spoon feeding. Criticism is information that will help you grow, as the saying goes. And one of my favourite quotes by Dwayne Alan Hans that I have on my phone and I look at regularly: "You are a glorious, shining sword, and criticism is the whetstone. Do not run from the whetstone, or you will become dull and useless. Stay sharp." I recognise I have bias. I have a stance and I'm being driven by it. My college has a very particular evidence-based stance, and so I promote that stance in the name of promoting my business. I recognise that. I'm yet to be really deeply convinced by the evidence that I've robustly examined and that I continue to examine to shift from my current position that believes we need to question whether regression to cause should be used by hypnotherapists, and that states that hypnosis should not really be used as a means of recovering memories. I've given much evidence to support that position, I think. And this is not necessarily about being right or wrong. It's not about being correct. It's about being informed and about educating the field effectively. Teach students both sides of a debate, an argument, a philosophy. Let people then choose their own direction rather than being dictated to, because the school and the teacher are financially invested in presenting the subject matter a particular way, and they refuse to accept any critique of it, despite several strong cases from the scientific studies. It's a very typical mindset that is espoused by pop psychology too, much more so than evidence-based psychology, that we need to deal with our past in order to be happy today. It's there in society often. Anger, regret, guilt, shame, they weigh us down. If you imagine climbing to a high snow-capped summit with a backpack filled with rocks, you'll eventually realise that rocky burden is going to slow you down, making the climb so much tougher than it needed be. The good news is there's so much more choice about the contents of our backpack than we usually realise. So often we live our lives in a prison of our own making and can't see that we're actually holding the key in our own hand. Remaining imprisoned by the burdens and regrets of the past is like wearing our own set of shackles, having a personal cloud hovering over us, or our own black dog of depression as an unwanted companion. Human beings are naturally goal-focused. On our journey through life, our emotional and psychological health is represented by a forward, upward, outward mindset. We look forward to activities, progressive stages of life, outings. We focus on connecting with family, friends, work, hobbies. We set our sights upward on ambitions, goals, and achievements. If you're spending too much time looking in the mirror and not enough time looking out of the window, it might be time to stop, notice your choices, and reclaim some control. There's so much more out there than regression. When we only look back, we tend to blame the past and some significant elements of the past. There's little evidence to support symptom substitution, for example, that notion that we're all somehow emotionally hydraulic. If we don't deal with a particular negative emotion, it only appears somewhere else in a different format as another symptom. And this is just not the case. It's been robustly disproven since way back in the 1960s by Hans Eysenck. I hope I've given you some food for thought. I've not fully exhausted the debate here. That would be impossible with a short 30-minute YouTube clip. But I hope it's made you want to properly explore this subject in some depth and know that there's so much more depth and dimension to the use of regression to cause methodologies.